Our speaker this evening is Seth Dillon, owner of the Babylon Bee, who delights and entertains us on a daily basis, bringing a smile to all of our faces with their satire. If you're unfamiliar with their publication, let me share in their own words who they are. The Babylon Bee is the world's best satire site, totally inerrant in all its truth claims. We write satire about Christian stuff, political stuff, and everyday life. The Babylon Bee was created ex nihilo in the 8th day of the creation week, exactly 6,000 years ago. We have been the premier news source through every major world event from the Tower of Babel and the Exodus to the Reformation and the War of 1812. We focus on just the facts, leaving spin and bias to other news sites like CNN and Fox News. If you would like to complain about something on our site, take it up with God. And recently, their delightful satire has been under attack by none other than the New York Times, Facebook, and others. They recently chalked up a big win, and I'm going to turn it over to the infinitely wise and smart CEO, Seth Dillon, to tell us all about it.
Thank you for having me here. Hosting me at this wonderful event. I'm not used to hanging out with lawyers, talking with lawyers, and getting free food and wine. Normally, it costs me like $400 to $600 an hour. So, this is a nice change of pace, I will say. Thank you for that introduction. You nailed you basically gave my presentation for me, because this is going to be really redundant now. Because one of the points that I want to start out making is that the world has become too absurd to be satirized. And I don't know if you guys feel that way, but I'm actually quoting somebody when I say that. I'm quoting G.K. Chesterton. He said that in 1911. The world has become too absurd to be satirized. And all of this stuff that we've got going on hadn't happened yet, and he was saying that. Imagine what he would say if he were alive today. I want to run through a couple of examples that you might be familiar with, just to jog your memory and remind you of how crazy things have become. Fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting, with a news anchor standing in front of burning cars. Mostly peaceful. That's incredible, isn't it? This is not photoshopped. The State Department calls on the Taliban to form an inclusive and representative government. This is not a Babylon Bee skit, it's a real thing that just happened. That's pretty recent. Biden dismisses Afghans falling out of planes by saying that was 4 to 5 days ago. It was 2 days ago. Now, this is comedy, right? This is comedy. Let's just read headlines. We'll just read real headlines. As a transgender woman, I am biologically female. Make sense of that. What does the word biologically mean in that context? Transgender weightlifter Laurel Hubbard named Sportswoman of the Year. This is on Breitbart. This is a real story. That actually happened. Washington University creates segregated housing specifically for black students. That is not a joke. That's real. This is real. These are not Babylon Bee headlines. Did I go back? I think I did. Review analysis. Stanford students are more likely to wear masks on bicycles than helmets. It's smart kids that go to Stanford, right? I thought so. That is some warped, out of whack risk assessment. I don't wear a helmet when I ride a bike. I'm sorry, I don't, but I don't wear a mask either. Can men get pregnant? Healthline addresses this question affirmatively. Is it possible? Yes. It's possible for men to become pregnant and give birth to children of their own. In fact, it's probably a lot more common than you think. In order to explain, we'll need to break down some common misconceptions about how we understand the term man. They're going to break down some misconceptions for you while telling you that men can give birth. They're breaking down misconceptions. That's wild. That wasn't my stuff. That was real. You don't clap for me. That was real. But this is the thing. We do satire. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Babylon Bee, are most of you familiar with the Babylon Bee? Okay. Good. So the Babylon Bee was started in 2016, and it's like, it's usually described in the media as the conservative version of The Onion, basically, which is, I guess you could say it's a fair assessment. We come at the issues from a different perspective than they do. But we do the same thing that they do. We do news satire. And news satire is really, at its core, the project of exaggerating the truth to make a point. You take a look at like what's going on in the world. You wake up every morning, you read the headlines, you see what's happening, and then you exaggerate that, you build on that to make a joke, to mock something, to expose the absurdity of something, to ridicule something. But you do it by going a step beyond the truth in the direction the truth was already pointing. That's really what satire does most of the time. It uses a lot of irony and mockery to accomplish that. But that's really the project. We're doing that in an environment where reality looks like that. So it's interesting the problems that creates, because one, I have a lot of people come up to me, they come up to me all the time, and they say, your job must be so easy, the world's crazy, you get to make fun of it. Not really, because we have to exaggerate that. You have to do a parody of a parody. And it's funny watching our writers struggle to do that. It's hard. They've asked me for raises, and they've been denied. But it is actually much harder to do satire. That's why G.K. Chesterton said all those years ago, the world has become too absurd to be satirized. You know, he was in a very different age. He was saying that, but it was challenging then. Imagine how challenging it is now. So maybe they do deserve a raise, and I'm convincing myself of that in this moment. But so there's two problems. One of them is the world is so absurd it's difficult to satirize. The other one is, when we make these jokes, right? We'll make a joke, it comes true. The joke comes true. Now, we've started categorizing these as fulfilled prophecies. So, you know, we'll tell a joke, and then some time will pass, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. This is just, it's absurd. Okay, I'll just show you. I'll show you. Show rather than tell. That's what they say, right? This is a Babylon Bee headline. We looked at this situation that was going on with Abraham Accords. We think, how would CNN cover this? Are they going to cover this, really recognizing how monumental this moment is? No, they're going to pick at Trump not paying attention to COVID protocol. So we wrote a headline. We said, CNN criticizes Israel Arab leaders for shaking hands in the middle of a pandemic. It's not hysterical. None of you laughed. It's okay. But look at, I highlighted for you here, 2:23 p.m., September 15th. This next slide is a real post by CNN 5 hours later. Let's go. I mean, it's plagiarism. Is it not? Like, did they read our site and copy it? White House largely disregards coronavirus precautions during Abraham Accords signing. That's wild, isn't it? Okay, this is silly. Pant sales plummet as everyone working from home. I like his pink boxers. That is exactly how I work. So, I don't know where we found that. We must have photoshopped that, because I don't think you'd find that on a stock photo site. This was published on, I've dated these, March 25th, 2020, and then you go to the next headline here. This is March 26th, 2020, on Yahoo Finance. Amid coronavirus, Walmart says it's seeing increased sales of tops, but not bottoms. Weird, right? That's a silly example. This one, though. BLM writers awarded Nobel Peace Prize. Well, that would be, with this one, we thought, what would be the most absurd thing possible that could be done in response to what we're seeing out there on the streets? What would be the craziest thing possible? This, right? The Peace Prize. Mostly peaceful protests happening here. That was in September. This is from The Guardian. Black Lives Matter movement nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Norwegian cites global impact of BLM in raising awareness and consciousness of racial injustice. That was surprising to me that actually happened. But that is, those are the two challenges that we face, the primary challenges that we face, is that the reality has become so absurd, it's very difficult to satirize it, and when you do satirize it, it comes true. It tends to come true. I could show you. If you go on, Kyle Mann is our editor-in-chief. He documents these fulfilled prophecies. It's a lot of fun to watch. He's got like a hashtag for it. If you know how to look that up, you go on his Twitter and you look at all the times he's posted these. There's dozens of them. Dozens. They just keep coming. It's like every 2 weeks or so, one of our jokes comes true, which is a little disconcerting. It's funny at first, and then it's a little cringe. So it's interesting. This is used against us a lot. In some of the fights that we're having, the ongoing fights with censorship and fact-checking and stuff like that, the fact that so many of our jokes come true or are believable is often used as an argument for saying we shouldn't be allowed to make them anymore. Because if we're making these jokes, people are going to believe them. This is misinformation, they try to say. It's misleading misinformation. These jokes are no longer funny. They're false. And false information's dangerous. We need to fact check them and make sure that people aren't believing this false information. One of my main responses to that, when people tell me that these things are too close to reality, they come true too often, is to point out the simple fact that jokes are funny because of their proximity to the truth, not their distance from it. When you laugh at a comedian, when a comedian makes a joke, it's very easy to think, well, why is that funny? It's funny because it's true, right? There's a grain of truth in every joke. I mean, these are common sayings. Everybody recognizes this. If you divorce a joke so far from reality that nobody would possibly believe it was true, it's not going to be funny. It's not going to land. It's not going to make a point. There's no point to that. But that's one of the kind of creative ways that they've tried to put us in this misinformation box and try to censor us, is by suggesting that our jokes are too believable, that they're too close to reality. The problem is, reality is too close to satire. That's the problem, and we need to recognize that for what it is. Now, you mentioned political correctness. Who here thinks political correctness is a problem? I mean, it's getting a little out of control. I might say some politically incorrect things tonight, and I apologize if you think you're in a safe space. You're not in a safe space. One of the ways that they're trying to limit what kind of jokes you can tell is by saying you can't offend anybody. Well, you can offend many people, but not certain people, right? There's certain jokes you can't make, certain people you can offend. If you do that, you've committed an unforgivable crime. And one of the ways that they actually have a term for this that it's been around for a little while. It's called punching down. Comedians have now been prohibited from punching down. And what they mean by that basically is there's this hierarchical structure of, different groups and layers in society. And if you're closer to the top, you can't joke about the people beneath you. You have to joke about the people who are above you. So they're rigging the system so that you can only make certain jokes about certain people. And the whole thing is predicated on this idea that there's people beneath you. It's weird. We're told by Facebook, this is a new policy that Facebook is putting into effect. They just recently announced this. It was in June. They announced this. It's on their website. You can look it up. They are now they're going to allow satire on their platform so long as it does not punch down. If it's punching down, then it's hatred under the guise of satire. So this is just like what they did before. Initially, with the fact-checking and everything, it was misinformation under the guise of satire. Now, with this punching down thing, it's hatred under the guise of satire. So you're making jokes about people that you're not supposed to joke about. And it applies in the most broad categories possible. For me, I'm a man, right? I'm not allowed to joke about women. That would be punching down. Well, why? Are women beneath me? I mean, can you think of anything more condescending than that? Than to think to yourself, I can't joke about that person. They're beneath me. That's so condescending, isn't it? So we reject that whole premise. We reject the idea. We believe that people are created equally, and because of that, we should be allowed to joke about everybody. Right? Can I? There we go. I mean, I don't know. The women thing I think is a little weird. When you get into like the other stuff, the intersectionality stuff, that's where they really get aggravated. And it becomes an extremely egregious error to make those kinds of jokes. It's actually in the news right now. I was going to add it to this, but I didn't have time. I had already sent the presentation over. Dave Chappelle, have you guys heard about this? His new series? He's being attacked right now. They're trying to cancel him again. I don't know how many times they've tried to cancel him because of jokes that he was making. And they literally use the term punching down. He's been punching down with his jokes. He's making fun of protected groups that you're not allowed to make fun of. Now, he's a black man. He's in one of the protected groups. But he's making fun of more protected groups than him. And so he's punching down. This is a really interesting situation here where comedy is really being stifled, and it's a deliberate strategy on the part of the left to use political correctness as a weapon to not just keep people from laughing, but keep them from thinking, and to keep them thinking the same way. Where was I here? Okay. Now, censorship. We got to get into the fact-checking thing because fact-checking is one of the weirdest and craziest things that happens to us as a satire site. People get particularly worked up when they hear the kinds of things that get fact-checked on our website, and I want to show you some examples of that. In the fact-checking age, like I said, jokes are no longer funny, they're false, and false information is dangerous. So I want to show you, these are headlines that we published on the Babylon Bee that were seriously fact-checked and rated false. CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin news before publication. Now, this is not believable because it's not possible. It's one of those nonsensical jokes that's just silly, and you go, ha-ha. It's not really hysterical, it's funny, whatever. Okay, CNN's biased. That got fact-checked by Snopes, rated false. Facebook sent us a warning saying that if we continued to publish false information, our page would be demonetized and we would be deplatformed. As a result of this story. It's unbelievable. Trump, I have done more for Christianity than Jesus. Now, so back to what I was saying earlier about how there's a hint of truth in every joke. This is playing on Trump's ego, right? He's got a bit of an ego thing. This went viral on the left. There were prominent New York Times reporters sharing this, thinking it was real. And they love to accuse the right of being gullible, and we buy into this stuff. And the reason the Babylon Bee is popular is because, those crazy, stupid conservatives and Republicans are so gullible, they'll believe anything. When we publish a story like this, though, they share it like crazy. California Christians must now register Bibles as assault weapons. Kind of believable, right? CNN praises Taliban for wearing masks during attacks. This is definitely believable. And this got shared like crazy because people believed it. Now, who's that an indictment of? Us or CNN? CNN, right? Ocasio-Cortez appears on The Price is Right, guesses everything is free. It says free down here. Snopes did this lengthy thing where they researched this and they watched the episodes from that certain day to make sure this didn't really happen. They interviewed 100 people. It turns out this was Photoshop. That's not actually AOC sitting in that chair during this show. This was a fake story. If you want to feed a fact checker donate to the Babylon Bee. We are keeping them in business. We're keeping their families fed. Pope Francis says COVID vaccine will now be required to enter heaven. I think that's believable. I love this one. Ninth Circuit Court overturns death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, there's two reasons I love this one. I wrote this one, and it was named by National Review as the stupidest fact check ever. So, the news organization that spent time researching this claim, they call it a claim, by the way. They always call our headlines claims. USA Today researched this claim, joke, and cited 15 sources in their lengthy refutation of this joke. They checked the Ninth Circuit Court's website. They called people, they were digging, they really dug, and tried to find out if the Ninth Circuit Court actually overturned the death. What would that even mean? Does that mean, was she resurrected? It doesn't make, it's just like the washing machine story. It doesn't make any sense. But it perfectly illustrates the lengths to which these people go. Now, it's interesting. Facebook, who we have constant problems with, we have ongoing current problems with Facebook. They're throttling our stuff like crazy. Facebook paid, if you scroll to the bottom of the fact check, the USA Today fact check of that article about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, scroll to the bottom, italicized font, all the way at the bottom, it says, paid for in part by grants from Facebook. So Facebook pays USA Today to fact check jokes. The jokes get rated false, and then Facebook tells us that we can't stay on their platform anymore because we're writing false material. We're spreading fake news. It's this weird circular system where they're funding these fact checks against us and then dinging us for failing and putting out false information. It's really interesting and silly how circular that is. But recently, Facebook has been throttling us. I was just where did I just talk about this? I was on Tucker Carlson just the other night talking about the issue of Facebook throttling us, and I told him, we had an article recently. We have over 1 million followers, by the way, on Facebook, which is not an insanely massive number, but it's a large number. It's a lot of people. When we post something to Facebook, it should reach a lot of people if there's 1 million people following us. We posted an article recently about how least masculine society in human history afraid of the rising threat of masculinity, or something like that. And it's roughly the wording of the headline. And it reached 11 people. 11 people. And I told Tucker, I said, I could have printed that article out and nailed it to a telephone pole in a small town, and it would have reached more people. There's something wrong here. There's something going on. There's throttling happening. Now, it's interesting, when I ask Facebook about this, when I approach them and I say, are you guys throttling us? Are you just tweaking things a little bit so that nobody sees our content? Is that what you're doing? Because we used to drive 90% of our traffic through Facebook, and now it's like less than 20%. We're lucky if people find these things and click on them on Facebook. And they say, after 2, 3, 4 weeks of silence, no response, they'll say something like, there are currently no violations on your page. Your page has like a page quality measurement, and it's green if everything is good, it's yellow if there's a warning, it's red if there's a flag or something. Like, there's no flags, you're good, And I'm like, well, that's not what I asked. I didn't ask if we had any violations. I can see that there's no violations. I can also see that there's clearly throttling happening. What's going on with the throttling? Now, they put out this thing, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, it's called the News Quality Score system. And this launched leading into the election of 2020, where they started rating websites based on the quality of the information that they were putting out and whether or not it was reliable. And they use fact checkers oftentimes to determine that. So I asked them, I'm like, Facebook, is there any chance that we have a low news quality score because we get fact checked a lot and our stories get rated false, even though we're not a news site, we just publish jokes? And they wouldn't answer me. Months went by, they wouldn't answer me. Finally, I did get a response after I went to the media. This always I have to go to the media first, and we're fortunate enough to have an audience large enough where the media actually cares about what happens to us. So I'm talking about this in the media, and Facebook finally responds after I've been on the news talking about it, and says, well, we define news to be anything that might influence the news ecosystem. Which is, in my view, anything published by anyone, right? Anything published by anyone could potentially influence the news ecosystem, especially a site with a large audience like ours. Like if we publish these jokes that some people believe are true, whatever, they get shared a lot, that's influencing the news ecosystem for sure. So they are, in a sense, admitting that everyone is potentially caught up in the news quality score system. They won't say it explicitly, but they define news so broadly that they can apply it to anybody that they want to and throttle them. We have charts that show our reach is down, like it's going down like this, and it's steady. It's not leveling off. It's continuing to plummet. There'll come a time in the very near future where we just won't have any traffic from Facebook anymore, which isn't very funny. I'm sorry, it's not funny, but it's mostly sad. It is fortunate, though, that we are able to generate media attention. It's one of the ways that we've been able to fight back against some of this stuff is, when we do draw attention to it, we do tend to get a response. We've been suspended on Twitter. We've been suspended on MailChimp. We've been suspended on Instagram. We've been suspended on Facebook. We've been demonetized on Facebook. All of those things have been reversed and called mistakes once we've made a lot of noise about it and generated a lot of media attention. It usually gets reversed. Not always, and oftentimes it's not being reversed for a lot of people who are smaller than us that you've never heard about. It happens to them, and they can't generate the attention that we can generate, and so they just stay suspended, and it doesn't get reversed as a mistake. I'm going to delve into some legal waters here with a bunch of lawyers in the room, so you'll have to talk to me afterwards and tell me where I land on this and whether or not I'm right about this. But this is my take on this. I mean, we have a lot of people who come to us all the time, and they say, okay, Facebook's a private company, right? They can do whatever they want. Whatever they want. Is that true? Do you guys agree with that? I don't think it's true. So one of the reasons I don't think it's true is because Facebook is enjoying immunity under Section 230. They're enjoying that immunity, and they're enabled to moderate content on their platform basically through the language in Section 230 that says, anything that's lewd or indecent or harmful, threats of violence, whatever, or otherwise objectionable is one of the phrases in there, which I think is unfortunately ambiguous. But they have the right to moderate content, but they're supposed to do it in good faith. And the way that I view Section 230 is I view it as this legal benefit that has qualifying conditions. Similar to like tax-exempt status. If you want to get tax-exempt status, you can't go around, endorsing political candidates. If you do, you might lose your tax-exempt status. So there are restrictions on your speech, right, if you want to get tax-exempt status. I think the same should be true for Section 230 in these big tech companies. There should be restrictions on what they're able to do in terms of political viewpoint discrimination. There should be limits on what they're doing in terms of their moderation, because everything right now is falling under the umbrella of, they're immune. They can do whatever they want. They can moderate however they want to. I don't think Section 230 was designed to enable that type of malicious viewpoint discrimination, especially when there's language in there that talks about how the internet is a place for a diverse, political discourse. So I'd love to have conversations with you guys about this and hear viewpoints. But does anybody agree with me on my take on that? Any hands agree with me? Like 3 people. Jeez. Okay. All right. I want to talk to the other ones. I want to know where I'm wrong on that. Yeah. So utility. Somebody said public utility.
Make Facebook a utility.
Yeah. Well, Justice Thomas's comments on the whole thing are it's really the social networks really essentially are the public square of the modern age, right? The public square, the digital public square. It's where the vast majority of meaningful public discourse happens at this stage, including from government actors. You are cut off from a lot of their communication with the public if you're not on these platforms. So it's interesting. His comments are, that they should really be treated as common carriers, and which would prevent them from being able to discriminate in who they can have on their platforms, because as places of public accommodation, they really don't have a choice in what messages they carry. That's one of the restrictions that come with being a common carrier. And he argues that they are common carriers, or should be treated as such, or at least may be treated as such. And he seems to be kind of chomping at the bit to get a chance to deal with that. And ultimately, that it may come down to it needs to be addressed in the Supreme Court. A lot of people also ask, like, why don't we start our own platforms? Why don't you just go out there and compete with these people? Like, create your own Facebook. I don't know about you guys, but like, anybody familiar with Parler? The rise and fall of Parler. Parler is what happens when you go out there and try to compete with Twitter and Facebook. There's two main problems. They don't want you to do it. They pull the rug out from under you and they shut you down. They destroy you, right? They vilify you. They pin things on you that are, all this stuff about Parler being responsible for January 6th. Like, the amount of hatred, vitriol, threats of violence that occur on Parler pale in comparison to the amount of material that's published on Twitter and Facebook hourly. Like, you could take months of data on Parler. There's such a small percentage of people that are on Parler, but they took the fall for that. So you go build your own, they'll kill it, they'll take the rug out from underneath it and destroy it. But second to that, it's not really an alternative to Facebook, because Facebook is where everybody is. Parler is where a bunch of like-minded people are. So Parler is more akin to like a Trump fan Facebook group within Facebook. It's not an alternative to Facebook. You've got this silo of like-minded people. You're creating an echo chamber. When conservatives go out there and create their own platform, nobody that's not a conservative wants to join it. So then all the conservatives who are there get bored, because it's not really a place where like meaningful public discourse is happening. And so they start shedding users. And next thing you know, Parler doesn't have any activity on it. So it really is difficult to compete with these sites. It's not as simple as going out there and starting your own. And when people ask me, why do you stay on Facebook? Why do you stay on Twitter? Why don't you go out there and create your own platforms? Well, for one thing, this is the modern public square. I know they're privately owned companies. I understand that. But this is where public discourse happens, and there's no alternative to that. If you leave that, you're going and you're like talking in the corner with your friends, whispering amongst yourselves. You're not engaged in the broader conversation. So I think we need to, and I'd love to have a conversation with some of you guys about this too, but I think we should assert our right to stay on those platforms, and I don't think they should have the right to kick us off of them, given that they really do seem to be the modern public square and places of public accommodation. This is, I just make jokes on the internet, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, the media's treatment of the Babylon Bee. Brian Stelter, he says that Babylon Bee is a fake news site. They call it satire. It's kind of a recurring theme. Where they're trying to suggest, this is Donnie O'Sullivan, he's another CNN personality. They're trying to suggest that we're see, satirical is in quotes, scare quotes. A lot of people sharing this quote satirical story on Facebook don't know it's satire. Having a disclaimer buried somewhere on your site that says it's satire seems like a good way to get around a lot of the changes Facebook has made to reduce the spread of clickbait and misinformation. Our disclaimer is buried. How hard was it to find out that we were satire when you went to our website to find that about us?
The about section.
Right. The about section. Click on the about. Yeah. And our tagline is fake news you can trust. So, but these reporters are really worried that our disclaimers are too buried. You'd never be able to know. And it's funny too, if you go, like I've shown you some headlines, if you go to, there's a lot of like really crazy photoshopped images on our site that kind of give it away that it's not real. This is a report from the New York Times. Satire kept popping up as a blind spot in 2019 and 2020. Facebook often dealt with far-right misinformation sites. Far-right misinformation sites that used, quote, satire claims to protect their presence on the platform. For example, the only example referenced in this piece, The Babylon Bee, a right-leaning site, sometimes trafficked and misinformation under the guise of satire. You know what's really interesting about this is you see how it's underlined, trafficked and misinformation? I didn't underline that. That's a hyperlink. If you click on it, it points to another New York Times piece that just talks about how we're a conservative satire site. It doesn't suggest that we trafficked in misinformation. They just threw a hyperlink on those words to make it look like they had a source for what they were saying. But the source not only didn't support it, it actually rebutted it. It refuted what they were trying to say there. So we actually sent a demand letter to the New York Times after they published this and told them that if they didn't revise this and remove these false statements, we'd sue them. And in 5 days they did. They took it down, which was extremely unexpected. We were actually mocked by a lot of people who were saying, your demand letter's stupid, you don't know what you're talking about, the New York Times is never going to do that. And then, 5 days later, they took it down. But it was false. This is this extremely ironic thing. And all the media hits that I did talking about this nonsense, the point I wanted to make over and over and over again was how extremely ironic it is that they are using misinformation to smear us as being a source of it. That's what they do. They're always projecting. They're always doing that which they accuse you of doing. They're doing it with Project Veritas. If you guys know Project Veritas, they're always accusing them of using deceptively edited videos, and they'll deceptively edit a video to make it look like they deceptively edit videos. It's remarkable. This is a little bit longer. It's a lot to read. I know you guys never read anything. I'm wondering the extent to which being a satire site, which makes them exempt from Facebook's fact-checking program, has allowed them to traffic in misinformation under the guise of comedy. Do you think that's a deliberate strategy? This is Kevin Roos, a technology writer at the New York Times, wondering if maybe we're deliberately calling ourselves satire so that we'll be exempt from Facebook's fact-checking program. By the way, I've never been exempt from Facebook's fact-checking program. We get fact-checked constantly, so I don't know what he's talking about. But the person that he's interviewing, this is the way that the New York Times works. They didn't interview us. The person answering his question is another New York Times reporter who had interviewed us. So he's asking her about our motivations rather than us. And she says, well, that's a great question. It's been a big source of controversy. They've had a few articles that were fact-checked and rated false, which the Bee's writers and editors claimed prompt Facebook to threaten them with being demonetized. Facebook does not deny this, by the way. That's false. Facebook apologized publicly for threatening to demonetize us over that CNN washing machine thing, so they did not deny it. The Bee's founder, Adam Ford, has claimed that Snopes fact-checked them in ways that were egregious with standards that wouldn't be applied to, for example, The Onion. That's true. When they fact-checked The Onion, are you guys familiar with The Onion? The Onion's been around a long time. When you read a fact-check about The Onion, go look it up. Look it up on Snopes. It's kind of funny. They'll fact-check The Onion. They'll say, oh, you believe this was true? What's wrong with you? This is from The Onion, the funniest satire site on the internet. That's how the fact-check goes. With us, it's, oh, this is misleading misinformation. This could lead people to believe things that are false. This is dangerous. This is harmful. So the language is always very different with the way that they handle us. The Bee feels they're being targeted unfairly, but Snopes has poked at the fact that their pieces can sometimes be easily mistaken for real news, which might fall on them, not their readers. It's our fault. It's our fault. Again, if reality is absurd as it presently is, and it's difficult to satirize, and our satire is believable, that is reality's fault, not ours. It's reality's fault. And it's the left that's made reality so absurd. Sorry if there's any leftists in here. This slide is only in here because it's cool. It has nothing to do with the presentation, but Elon Musk said the Babylon Bee is savage, and so I included it in my presentation.
He may change his mind. He's moving to Texas.
Yeah, he is. He's moving the whole show, right? Tesla? So I'm going to wrap up here soon so that we can get to a Q&A time and you guys can ask me some questions. But I want to address, first of all, the question of why would there be such a serious, concerted effort to mischaracterize us, deliberately mischaracterize us, spread misinformation about us in order to censor us, in order to deplatform us, in order to demonetize, in order to chip away at our influence on the culture. And I think the reason is summed up really beautifully in another quote. I'm going to quote G.K. Chesterton again, who earlier he'd said the world had become too absurd to be satirized, he also said that humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. Have you ever heard that quote? I love that quote. Humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. I love that because there's like this disarming thing about humor where you wrap a message in the package of humor and it's very easily delivered and very easily received. And you can talk about even really controversial topics that get people really heated, that get people fighting at the, Thanksgiving table with family when you're talking about politics. You can share a Babylon Bee article, though, and you might actually reach somebody that otherwise would be really offended by what you said because you joked about it. So there's an effectiveness there. It's the effectiveness of it that makes it a target. And it's one of the ways we actually measure success. When people ask me, do I get discouraged when people are coming after us and trying to silence us and censor us? Not at all. I mean, it's an indication that we're doing something right, is it not? Would they be doing that if we weren't effective? Would they be doing that if they weren't scared of what we were doing? Would they be doing that if they weren't bothered or fearing that what we were doing was really effective? I don't think so. So I think it's actually one of the marks of our success beyond, the incredible wealth that I have, and the insane amounts of traffic that come to the websites and the sweet, sweet ad revenue that pours down upon me from it. Beyond those things, I think that one of the main ways of judging success is who is attacking you. I also think when it comes to humor and satire, if you've got everybody angry, you're doing something right. Right? I mean, we actually piss off a lot of people on the right. Like that Trump joke about Trump, I've done more for Christianity than Jesus. We get a lot of people mad on the right. It's good if you can't have one side always happy with you. It means you're not always parroting their narrative, right? If you're poking at your own side a little bit and you're getting everybody riled up, then I think you're doing something right there too. So we want to make sure that the hate mail that comes in is coming from all sides. There is a beautiful irony in a lot of this too, though. Has anybody here heard of the Streisand effect? The Streisand effect, when Barbara Streisand was trying to suppress these aerial images of a home that she'd bought, and they had been posted to some website. They'd been viewed 6 times or something ridiculous. But she didn't want them on the internet, so she sued the website or whoever posted them. And the lawsuit brought media attention, and all of a sudden, before you know it, millions of people had seen these images. So she drew attention to the very thing she was trying to suppress. And that's exactly what's been happening with the Babylon Bee for going on 5 years now, a little more than 5 years actually. They have been repeatedly trying to suppress us, and they've been putting rocket fuel in our engine and doing it. It's the great irony of what they're trying to do, is that they're actually drawing a lot of attention to us and bringing more people to awareness of what we're doing, and then, they get on board, and they start sharing our stuff. So, Facebook's going to squash that soon, but for now, it's been working out in our favor. Our mission statement, if I could summarize it extremely succinctly, and it sounds negative, but it's not, I promise, is to ridicule bad ideas. C.S. Lewis, who's a favorite author of mine, extremely influential in my life, he said at one point that good philosophy must exist if for no other reason than because bad philosophy needs to be answered. I think satire is necessary for exactly the same reason. Satire ridicules bad ideas. And bad ideas need to be torn down before they can take root in people's minds and hearts, especially the minds and hearts of young people. And satire is extremely effective at doing that. I want to, before I wrap up, I just want to show you guys. This is a little wild and weird, but I want to show you something that we're working on because we're going beyond news satire. We're getting into media. Everybody watches videos now. Short videos, for scrolling through their video feeds, whatever. There's a lot of people that have been doing great satire in animated form for a long time. Think of The Simpsons or Family Guy or South Park or whatever. And so we have some super talented people, and we're starting to dabble in this stuff a little bit. And I just wanted to show you guys a little teaser of something that we've worked on. It makes a point, and it's based on, I don't know which slide it is here. It's going to be the next one. It's based on the movie A Quiet Place. Have you guys, anybody familiar with A Quiet Place? Some of you. You have to be very quiet or the monsters kill you, right? There's these aliens that come to Earth, and they can hear even the smallest noises. So you have to walk around on sand with your shoes off, and you have to whisper, And there's this crazy scene where she's going into labor and she has to stay quiet while she's going into labor, which is just insane. So they're setting off fireworks as a distraction. It's wild. I won't tell you how it ends. But we did a brief parody of that, which tells a little story, and I think you'll enjoy this. But this is some of the upcoming stuff that we're starting to do.
Just need to get to the other side of this farm.
You know, maybe it's just me, but I think it's bad when a cop dies too.
What are you doing? These monsters kill if they hear you say an opinion they don't like. Don't make a sound.
It's just, if raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour causes 1.5 million people to lose their jobs, how is that idea still on the table?
If your business can't afford to pay employees $15, your business deserves to close.
Why?
You have to stop voicing your opinions, or that thing will kill us.
I agree with Martin Luther King Jr. that we should judge someone by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin.
You just got us killed!
I judge everything through the lens of race.
Free speech is bad. Free speech is bad.
What are you doing now?
Love is love. Love is love. Love is love. Love is love. Love is love.
I don't even know what that means.
Be quiet. The alphabet is problematic because it doesn't contain enough letters to represent all genders. We should put white people in camps and abuse them. Like, full-on torture white people.
Oh, I can't believe you got us out of there.
I had to think on my feet.
I'm just glad the three of us are safe.
3 of us?
I mean, two of us. I hate babies. That's not a baby. It's nothing. It's just a big old bump on my wife's belly. It could be a parasite. It could be a couple cells. It could be just garbage, but it's certainly not a baby.
Our guys can't believe they get to do this for a living. They have a lot of fun with it, but they're also having an impact because it's making a point. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We're going to be doing a lot more of that type of content and getting into the media sphere. And, who knows? Maybe we'll have a show one day. But I think it's important that we continue to live out our mission statement, to ridicule bad ideas, and to really be bold truth tellers and be unafraid to say what we think. You know, this whole idea of getting banned, all the time, one of the things that our writers are concerned about is, am I going to write a headline that's going to get me in trouble? Am I going to get us banned? And, when you think about it, it's like, okay, that could have a negative impact on our business, right? It could also be a positive. If we got banned on Facebook, I'd be back on Tucker Carlson. We'd be talking about it. There'd be people donating. We'd get a lot of subscriptions. It would be good in the short term, right? We would lose a lot of that traffic, though. It would over the long term, probably negatively impact our business. And we have to think about what is more important, because there's literally people who have laid down their lives for freedom, right? Are we really going to be that worried about getting banned on Twitter because we're afraid to speak out? If we censor ourselves, aren't we doing the tyrant's work for him? So I tell everybody, be bold, tell the truth. I think the greatest accomplishment on Twitter is not getting verified or building a huge following. I have 100,000 followers. That's decent. It's a lot of followers. I'd give it up. I think the best thing that could happen to you on Twitter is to get banned for saying something true. So, it wouldn't be best for the business. I think ultimately it's best in the long run for free speech and truth itself, because truth is under assault. So with fake news, we promote it. So that's it. Thank you, guys. I was told you'd give me my check at 7:30 and I'd be out of here.
Hey, Seth, thanks so much for coming tonight. Just a question about the internal process. I'm always curious. People sit around a big table and come up with these ideas. How does it work in terms of editorial, producing the content and making the decisions about what to publish and what to not? Do you hit a wall sometimes where you just say, no, we can't go that far? So could you walk us through a day in the life of the Babylon Bee and how these ideas are hatched, who hatches them, what editorial influences you or others have in the whole process of producing what you do?
Good question. I don't exercise a lot of editorial control. I didn't start the Bee, I took it over. And when I took it over, one of my aims was to not change it, but to just grow it and in the direction it was already moving in. So I didn't want to come in and be really hands-on and say, oh no, we're not going to joke about this, or we need to focus more on that, or so I let the guys kind of do what they wanted to do. But the process, in a nutshell, is just, we have our communication channels like Slack or our writer's room, and we look at the headlines every day, and we just have really brilliant people who are able to see. There's a certain kind of, they just see it. They see a real headline, and they think, oh, this is how you would satirize that. And they start pitching, and there's a lot of iteration that happens. The joke is in the headline. Right? I didn't even have to point you to the articles. You didn't have to read the articles. The joke's in the headline and the accompanying image. So we always start out with the headline pitches, and we toss them back and forth, and we eventually land on one or two, that's just like, that's it. That's right. So it's very collaborative. We do have an editor-in-chief who makes like a lot of the final decisions on what we're going to run with, and he produces a lot of the best headlines himself. But all of us contribute to some extent where we're throwing ideas out there and trying to figure out what's going to work best. But as a team, we kind of collaboratively iterate on them until we get it right. I'm not sure who's controlling which and what I'm answering. The mic guy, yeah.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to thank you personally for a very important, relevant story you reported on today. Texas introduces express lanes for guys in cowboy hats driving lifted pickup trucks alone.
I hadn't even seen that one yet. That's a good one, though. I love when someone shares one with me that I haven't seen, and I get to, I can't read them all. Was it?
I was wondering if the Onion had ever reached out to you or made a statement in your defense.
No. Never. And you'd think maybe some of them on the staff would be sympathetic, because they don't deal with the same kind of stuff that we deal with. They make the right jokes. They have the right targets, so they don't have the same problems. I know that some of our writers have had back channel communication with some of their writers, but it's never been like about those issues or sympathetic or anything like that. We've never had any contact with them about it. Not really at all, which is interesting because I would promise you that if the Onion was under this kind of assault where they were being censored and they were being told what they could and couldn't joke about, we would be making statements about it, for sure.
How did you decide on the name Babylon Bee? My hometown paper was the Fresno Bee, so I thought it was interesting you had the Babylon Bee.
That's a good question. So Adam Ford is the founder of the Babylon Bee. Some of you actually know him from before the Babylon Bee. I think there's a few people here that know him from back. There you go. Back there, those guys. He was doing this Christian comic strip online, and he decided that he wanted to compete with The Onion and do a site that was similar to what The Onion was doing. He was trying to think of like a name for it. He wanted it to be a Christian site specifically. The first name he landed on as his idea was the Christian Gazette. And he almost launched the site under that name. And then he thought, you know what, it doesn't have enough of a ring to it, so he went back to the drawing board and was thinking a little bit more. The Babylon Bee really comes from this idea that in the Old Testament, when God's people are in exile in Babylon, he was likening that to the position that basically Christian conservatives are in the culture today, where we're ostracized. And we're writing dispatches from exile, essentially. So the idea there is dispatches from exile, and it has sweet alliteration, Babylon Bee, basically. That's it in a nutshell. And he designed the logo himself, which is pretty simple, and it actually looks a lot like Rush Limbaugh's logo. I don't know if you guys, it does, doesn't it? Wonder if there's a little subconscious influence.
Besides sharing constantly your articles online and your different subscription levels, what else can we do to help fight against censorship? Those have been helping.
I'm glad you mentioned subscription levels, because we started. Thank you. I planted this guy here. We actually started Elon Musk subscription tier. Did you guys know this? For $10,000 a month, you could subscribe to the Babylon Bee and the Elon Musk subscription tier. We were really courting Elon at the time because of that tweet where he said the Babylon Bee was savage. So we're like, okay, he's a fan. We're going to try to get him to sign up for 10 grand a month. He can afford it. And 3 people signed up for it. And 2 of them said it was a mistake and their wives would kill us if we didn't refund them immediately. They picked the wrong tier. What was your question, though? Oh, yeah. Sign up for the Elon Musk tier. I think it's a great question. And I give the same answer to everybody who asks me, like, what can we do? What can we do to help you? You don't have to help us directly. Just speak boldly. Like, stop censoring yourselves. I've had people ask me all the time, I can't be myself at work. I can't speak up at work. Well, that's because all of you are silencing yourselves. And you can take that power away by being bold in your speech and continuing to just say the truth and say what you think and assert your right to do that. I think that if we can embolden people to do that, and they will actually do it, that's the greatest thing they can do to help us, ultimately. It comes back to us. When there's a whole army of us being bold and unashamed. So I guess that would be my answer to that question. That's the best way to support us.
You made a good point earlier about...
I know.
You made several good points earlier.
Which one, though?
Well, the specific one, the dudes in cowboy hats, that was the most important one. But, about Facebook being the de facto public square.
Yeah.
And I've been encouraging a lot of my friends to reach out and try to join other social media, MeWe and others, etc. But I've maintained a presence on Facebook. I feel like it's ground that we should not cede to the other side. But I'm kind of mixed on this because I have effectively, much like the Babylon Bee, I've been shadow banned. I used to get 70 plus responses to things that I posted routinely, and now it's absolute zero at this point.
Maybe you're not interesting anymore.
Yeah. Well, I post a lot of stuff from the Babylon Bee, so you tell me.
This guy. Would you like a job?
But I am noticing on MeWe, I frequently see people posting from the Babylon Bee. I don't see your stuff on, as you point out, on Facebook. You are being shadow banned
For sure, yeah.
And what are your thoughts about whether we should stick around and try to fight the battle on Facebook and not cede ground, or participate in a parallel economy and find other places to go? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I touched on that a little bit earlier. I don't think that we should cede the ground either. There is no alternative to Facebook. There really isn't. These companies essentially have monopolies, or the next best thing. So you can't really go anywhere else because you're not going to have the same diversity of viewpoints. You're going to be in some kind of an echo chamber where there's a bunch of ideologically aligned people who are removing themselves from Facebook, which is fine. There's a place for that. You can have a conservative social network, which is just filled with conservatives. But that's not an alternative to Facebook. It's similar, but it's not an alternative. So I don't view those platforms as alternatives, and I really don't think it's like run and hide is the answer. I think that because these are essentially the modern public square, we do have a right to be there. And there's even court cases that have been decided where like remember Trump blocked somebody and they sued him because they had a constitutional right to not be blocked by him, and they ruled in favor of the people that he blocked and said that his Twitter feed was like a public forum. I don't know if that was a federal judge. Was it? So there's been precedent set for viewing these platforms as places where not just unprecedented amounts of speech from the public, but speech from government officials to the public is happening. It is the public square at this point. So I don't really think that we should, for a moment, lay down because they're saying that we shouldn't. we spread misinformation, we're hate speech under the guise of satire, they shadow ban you, whatever. We should fight for our right to stay on these platforms, absolutely.
What do you think about the left-wing Facebook
Whistleblower?
This lady that just came out talking about what they were, the insider, and I'm wondering what your view is on whether or not Congress would be beneficial if they made some legislative changes.
From what I can tell, I'm not deeply familiar with what's going on there and who she is and what she's about. Yes, I know who you're talking about. I think that I think that the left wants these social networks. I know. It's very clear, and they're explicit about it. They want these social networks to censor more, not less, more. So when people come out and say, oh, there's all these problems with Facebook, she's a leftist herself. She's an activist herself. She may hate Facebook, but she hates Facebook for a very different reason. She hates Facebook because they don't censor enough. So, to put power in Congress's hands and to have Congress aligned with people who are saying that these social networks aren't censoring enough, we're going to end up with laws that make it much easier for them to censor everybody than for them to actually allow for a range of different views and free public discourse. So my hope is that Congress would amend Section 230 to make it more explicit what the restrictions are, make it more clear what it means that these companies have to act in good faith when they're moderating content on their platforms. Make it clear that their immunity that Section 230 provides is contingent on them meeting the qualifying conditions. Congress could do that. I don't know that this Congress will. Or potentially, I guess there's a solution with the Supreme Court, which could, with its current makeup, be in our favor, in the favor of free speech. I'd be very interested to see how that would play out. I'm hopeful that one of those solutions will come into play, but I certainly don't think, with this situation where people are coming down on Facebook, because they're hating on Facebook, they're hating on them for very different reasons than us. We're mad that they're silencing us. They're mad that we're not being silenced more.
One of the things I was looking at actually today at my work, usually Explorer pops up and it's MSN or whatever, the basic Microsoft thing, and it's like Yahoo. And I started actually looking through some of the news, and I'm like, it's so...
Did you say Internet Explorer? What year is this?
Yeah, it's a bank. They haven't quite moved over to the next one because of
Windows
all the
7.
viruses. So got to keep secure, right? But it's so far gone left that to me it seems like you'd be able to actually make satire that's true. So if you get fact checked, the fact checkers... you could make it so satirical, but it's actually true that when they do the fact check, it would be right. Have you guys thought about that?
Well, I have, yes. We're waiting for that magical moment when one of the ones that comes true has been fact checked false, and they have to update the fact check and correct it and rate it true. We think about and pray for that all the time.
This forum was
it's actually
federalism.
likely.
So if you could add some federalist type of ideas into some of the satire, that would be interesting, I think.
It would be, yes. Thank you. Great questions. Keep them coming.
I'm just wondering if you have an all-time favorite Babylon Bee headline and also an all-time favorite not the Bee headline.
I'll give you a couple of my favorite Bee headlines. One of them was the first headline I ever wrote for the site. It got Snoped. It got fact-checked. And it was that, I'm going to botch the wording on it, but it was something like, Democrats draft legislation that would make it a hate crime to eat at Chick-fil-A. And I wrote that in 2018 at some point, and Chick-fil-A was in the news, and it went viral and got fact-checked and rated false. There's a few others. I love that Ruth Bader Ginsburg one because it had such an amazingly ridiculous fact check associated with it. There was one that we did about Joel Osteen, and I apologize if any of you are Osteen fans, but we did one about how he was wading through the waters, in his yacht, going through the waters of flooded Houston after Hurricane Harvey, handing out copies of Your Best Life Now. And that one went crazy viral. That was one of the first ones that we wrote that got shared literally millions of times. So that's a favorite. And then a more recent one is the motorcyclist who identifies as a bicyclist and sets world record. That's a good one. We made a little mockumentary based on that article, which you should check out. It's on our YouTube channel. It's hysterical. Was there another follow-up question? Oh, I hate the not to be articles because they're true. It's depressing. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. It's just a mess, not to be. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Not to be is our real news spin-off from the Bee, where we take all those stories that are so absurd they should be satire but somehow aren't, and report on those. So there's kind of like, there's the Babylon Bee headlines, and then Not the Bee, which is the crazy stuff like I was showing you at the beginning. Those are all relevant for Not the Bee and what we report on there. And Adam, who started the Bee, is now running Not the Bee, which is kind of cool. We run that business together. But yeah, I wish I had one for you. I don't. Do you have one? It's hard, isn't it? You asked me a hard question. Yeah, we've been approached by a lot of people, including Fox has approached us. A few other media companies have approached us wanting to do a segment like The Bee or Not the Bee, where they just throw headlines up and you have to guess. And I admit, I myself, not being familiar with all the headlines that we publish, I would be wondering sometimes too. I don't think I would always be able to guess which ones were real and which ones were fake. I mean, after what you guys saw tonight, I mean, there's some of those, you would not have guessed those were real, but they were.
We have a little gift to say thank you for joining us at Mountain States Legal Foundation, and you made a room full of lawyers laugh, so job well done. Yeah.
It's not heavy enough to be gold, so.
We'll work on that. Absolutely. Well, thank you again for coming this evening. We've had a very full day here at Mountain States of board meetings and planning for the next year, and I'm not going to lie, it is absolutely delightfully refreshing to have Seth here to lighten the mood after so much serious thinking about the year ahead. Here at Mountain States, we have a mission to protect and restore the Constitution of the United States. We do that exclusively through litigation in the courts. We have a fantastic group of attorneys in-house in our offices there in Denver. But while we are located in Denver, we glory in the opportunity to represent what we call the spirit of the American West, which we consider the last bastion of what made America the stronghold of liberty that it is. And we glory in the opportunity to continue protecting that. We have a tagline that we represent a free country for a free people, and we love the opportunity to do that. So thank you very much for supporting our efforts this evening. Thank you so much, Seth, for joining us, and we hope you have a lovely evening. Have a good night.